So we might as well start so we can get you out of here at 6:30, all right? So you can enjoy the rest of your evening. But anyway, this show's called Get Some, and we do it once a month, and it's a show about health with a human sexuality emphasis. So the topic changes each month. And this month's topic is about human trafficking. What is it? How close to home is it? What can we do to help prevent it? Okay, so that's what it's going to be about today. And I have like a list of some questions that I want to address with our guests that came in. I'll introduce them in a minute. But also, if anything comes to mind while they're speaking, or maybe I'm asking a question, just bring it up, okay? While it's, hot on your brain and while it's relevant to what we're talking about, all right? So that's how we'll do it, okay? So anyway, two people who are very active in the crusade against human trafficking right in our area are here with us today. So that's neat that we have them and we have their expert advice. And we have Dave Hershey, and he's the campus minister for the Christian Student Fellowship Organization here at Penn State Berks. So this is a familiar face that some of you may have seen around campus. And he's here Tuesday and Thursday evenings? Yeah. Okay. If you ever need to see him, he's usually over in the Cyber Cafe? Okay. And that's also a club here on campus too, if you're ever interested in joining that club. And then we also have Bob Morrison, and he's actually been involved in the fight against human trafficking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think for about 7 years, and he was first introduced to human trafficking in his travels in Asia and Africa. And he started what's called FREE here in Berks County, and that stands for, I have to look up for it, it's FREE, and it's Freedom and Restoration for Everyone Enslaved. And that was in response to sex trafficking, which was going on here in Berks County. So there's actually been about 12 suspected cases that we're investigating involving human trafficking within Berks County. So the really scary part is that it hits close to home sometimes, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, all right? So, when we think of human trafficking, a lot of times we think of it as international, and, it's actually closer than what we think. So maybe we should start with, what is human trafficking?
Sure. Well, part of the official definition, what is human trafficking, would be that it's the use of force, fraud, or coercion to enslave another person for sex, in a nutshell. What is sort of the size of this industry? It's about a $32 billion industry, and basically sex trafficking is a business model for prostitution. So prostitution, we understand sort of how that works. Sex trafficking came along. It's sort of the 20th century version of how to do prostitution really, really well and make a ton of money by just abducting people. Why get someone to volunteer to be a prostitute?
So it's like forced prostitution.
Right. When you can just abduct them and force them into it. But there is more complexity to how sex trafficking works than just a prostitute and a pimp, or a prostitute and a user. You have first you have the traffickers. So these are the guys who are going out and finding women and girls who range anywhere from 8 years old up into their mid-20s. And there's industry it's going on even here in the United States, where you have the average age of entry into prostitution between 12 and 14 years old. It's about a $32 billion industry, as I'd mentioned. So guys like Microsoft, Google, Netflix, all those, you add up their profits per year, and these guys are making more money.
Probably more than like NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball.
Sure, put it all
combined.
in context. Yeah. So you got the traffickers, that's one piece. The second is vulnerable people. 80% of the sex trafficking victims are women and children. And as I said, the average entry age is between 12 and 14. And the new frontier for where do we find these girls are minors under 18 here in the United States, because they are more inclined to listen to an adult who might lure them. And about 95% of them are either coming from a background of sexual abuse or coming from a broken home. And so they're kind of looking for stability. And someone comes in, a pimp, a trafficker, and offers that kind of stability for some money and such, and he lures them in. So you have traffickers, you have vulnerable people, and then you've got the buyers, the end users. And this is an industry that has grown basically unchecked over the last 20 years. And it's fueled by the pornography industry, which, if you look at sex trafficking as being $32 billion, then the pornography industry is about $97 billion. And the question there becomes, where did your pornography come from? It's not just this safe thing that's going on, with somebody doing filming or whatever. It's being produced, mass-produced. Kids are being abducted and brought into this whole process and exploited, beyond their wills and used. So you've got those three factors: traffickers, vulnerable people, the end user, and then there's a fourth factor, which basically, when you put them all together, causes this whole thing to basically grow without any stop, and that's us. We have grown to a place where we are a society that is sort of helplessly resigned to just allow this to happen. Now, none of us in here would say, oh yeah, sure, I support human trafficking and I support the enslavement of other people. And yet, by hearing about it on the news, by reading an article, about hearing it today, and choosing or kind of feeling like, I don't think I can do anything. I'm not sure if this is something I can address. We become a society that says, well, by not doing anything, it's just okay. So the evil of human trafficking can continue if we don't do anything.
So, initially we think of it as international, and now we know that it's within the United States, but where is it most prevalent in the United States?
You'll find it most in the big cities. Mm-hmm. So Atlanta, Georgia is a big hub, New York City, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, some of these large cities. But even though sort of to our awareness this still seems relatively new, in the last few years, it's been going on for a couple of decades, at a minimum, and so it's trickling down into Reading, Pennsylvania, where we had our first case in August of 2010.
And then you also mentioned young women and girls. How about boys and young men? Can they be involved?
They are. It's mostly in Asian countries that happens. And often boys and men are involved in labor trafficking, which is basically enslaving them to work and then just not pay them. But it's probably in the single digits that men and boys would be enslaved.
And how about the punishment for sex trafficking? So the punishment on many different parts. The punishment of the juvenile, the punishment of the pimp, and the punishment of the person eliciting sex from the juvenile.
Well, I think the technical official punishment is maybe 25 years in prison. It varies, but...
For which one?
For the trafficker,
okay.
the pimp. But I think what we've learned, just what I've learned going to meetings and researching it, is that one of the biggest challenges is that it's just a very hard crime to prosecute. Like the women who were, like the cases in Berks County, it was all, you see the brothels uncovered, and it's all the pictures of the women are arrested as prostitutes, and they don't talk to the police for whatever reason. Maybe they're illegal immigrants, maybe they've been told that if they talk in their country they came from, they probably can't trust the police, or maybe their family back home is threatened. So, a lot of times the women may not want to talk. They may be in fear of either their pimp or their family back home. So they're I think, what was the statistic? 70% of murder cases end up being solved, but like 1% human trafficking, just because it's so hard to prosecute. And I think that's part of the problem with our culture, which goes back to the culture of resigned people. Like we look at it and we're trained to think like, well, she's a prostitute, which means that she chose this life and X, Y, Z, whatever goes along with that. And pimps are like these cool guys. I mean, I know watching wrestling growing up, there was the Godfather who was a pimp, and he would always talk about pimping ain't easy. You know, in college, I mean, just the way we talk in our language, we talk about pimping. And I think that kind of contributes to the whole idea that, you know, she's the criminal and this guy is just a businessman, whereas it's the flip side where she's a victim and this guy who we kind of glamorize in our culture is the one who is an abusive jerk, thug, however you want to put it. And that's part of the challenge. And so yeah, it's very hard to prosecute. And I think another interesting thing I've learned is that some countries like Sweden actually made it, I guess they legalized prostitution, but they made it illegal to buy prostitutes. So basically they really put the focus on arresting the buyers, which they found has really reduced human trafficking, because I even think in Sweden if you're caught buying a prostitute, they like put your name in the paper. So it's not just, you know, the criminal side of it, but it's also just the shame with your whole family and friends not knowing that you're someone. So we don't do that in America, but that seems like in the worldwide stage that's something that's really worked to make it detrimental.
No, that's really true, and really, unfortunately, the way a lot of these cases are handled is it's so complicated to prove that someone has forced or coerced someone into doing something. I mean, if you think of that, that's sort of a psychological thing, right? That's led someone in. So unless you can say see the burns or see the abuse, you can't really prove that. And so often the way law enforcement has had to deal with this is just kind of raid a massage parlor and take the prostitutes to jail and then try to interview them.
And they're afraid to speak.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And a lot of them have been told, you know, if you talk to the police, I'll kill you. Or if you talk to them, well, you can't trust them anyway. Some of them are in on this. So for them, it's a misdemeanor. And they're in there for a number of months. They pay a fine, and then they're free.
But I was going to throw in like the other thing along with that though is that if it's an underage person, they don't need to prove the force, fraud, and coercion. Whether a 14-year-old girl, she can't legally choose to sell herself. So if that's happening, it's automatically considered human trafficking, forced prostitution.
Talk a little bit about the cases in Berks County. Are any of you aware that human trafficking happens in Berks County? I'll tell you what, I wasn't aware until about a year ago. I think some students had a display outside. Was that maybe from your group? There were some students that were doing a whole big educational component on it about a year ago. And I didn't even realize how prevalent it was here. So talk a little bit about the Berks County cases.
Sure. Really, it's been a number of places all around the county where this has been popping up. And kind of in the work, what they call sort of the low-hanging fruit, meaning the stuff that's right in front of you, the easy cases to see, were through these massage parlors. So it was very easy for pimps to come in and to sort of convert that kind of business into something sexual. And so basically you had a couple of cases where they were all Caucasian, but the majority of them were cases where they were Asian women who were brought in from other countries, South Korea predominantly. There was a woman from China was in one of them. Basically what would happen is they brought them into an area and they would solicit sex in that particular business. And ranging all the way from kind of West Reading, north of Reading, all the way out as far as Hereford, which is just north of Boyertown area. So you've got a pretty wide range. And essentially, when they would raid and take these women out, the women would go into jail. They'd be there for a couple of months, and then they would be deported. And as I'm told, they end up being brought back to a different place and sent out to another spot to basically do it again because nothing was proven to keep them out.